On November 19th, with very little fanfare, the BBC made a casual announcement that a manifesto had been approved in Portugal between a number of ministers in Europe, and they set upon two radically different objectives from what the ESA has done in the past. First of all, to launch their own astronauts, and secondly, to return ice samples from the outer planets. Now, the second objective is not terribly surprising. Europe has always had an objective as far as exploration is concerned, robotic exploration, and returning ice samples from places like Callisto or Enceladus or Europa or something along those lines would be instrumental in discovering life in the solar system beyond Earth. However, the first objective is something that Europe has never ever done. They've never shown an intense interest in putting up their own astronauts because, after all, they can put their astronauts on the ISS with the assistance of NASA and Roscosmos. However, Europe has now determined that they are falling behind their international competitors, including America and China, which they've said are rapidly pulling ahead, and the numbers support this conclusion. The place that we call the International Space Station has played host to 152 astronauts from the United States on 259 flights, 48 cosmonauts from Russia on 85 flights, and then 5 astronauts on 9 flights from Italy, 4 from France, 3 from Germany, and 1 from the United Kingdom. Now, I'm in no way trying to suggest that NASA is intentionally trying to exclude European astronauts, but it's very, very clear that the ESA has either not been putting a great deal of investment into this sort of thing, or that NASA has been assigning a lot more priority to their own people, and the Russians have been doing the same, than they've been assigning any priority to putting Europeans on the International Space Station. Indeed, Canada and Japan have both had more astronauts than any European country. And by the way, if you're a young woman who has ambitions of one day going to the ISS, well, if you're European, you may as well forget it, because there's been 2. Claudie Enyaré from France and Samantha Cristoforetti from Italy. As a matter of fact, this young lady is on so many posters throughout the Johnson Space Center, you would think that she was a NASA astronaut. She is a poster girl for their program, even though she doesn't work for NASA. Nevertheless, 2 European women in the entire history of the ISS. So clearly, Europe is way behind. But how the hell is Europe supposed to catch up in anything resembling a reasonable time when they are so far behind? I mean, Arianespace and their greatly maligned Ariane 6 is not looking to be a very competitive rocket. It's fully expendable, it's going to be expensive and only competitive because of subsidies from the government, and they don't have a human-rated launch system of any kind. How are they supposed to catch up? Well, I'm going to tell you a way that Europe could get their own astronauts into space in 4 years if they really wanted to. My name is Jordan Wright. I was born in the same year that the human race took its first steps on the surface of another world, and then we promptly betrayed those people's legacy by never going back. But now, over half a century later, there's a new breed of pioneers that are seeking to finish what these people set out to do so long ago. But there is trouble as well, so it's time for commentators like me to stop being polite and start getting angry. Now, if you'd like to take the official guided tour of the Ariane 6 launch complex, I have it linked in the description, but it has a lot of innovative things about it. The thing that I like the most is this mobile gantry building. That's right, unlike SLS, unlike the space shuttle, the Ariane 6 is going to have a building that will move along with it to the launch pad, providing it with protection from the elements all the way to launch point, which is pretty damned impressive. It also has a pair of chopsticks, similar to the idea of what we're using for the Super Heavy booster, of course not being used to catch a booster, but rather to hold on to the second stage of the Ariane 6 until launch point. Nevertheless, this is a fully expendable launch system. It was outdated at the time when the design work was beginning, although Arianespace did not really realize this because it started in 2014, and at that time Falcon 9 was far from proven. So their whole idea was to make this thing expendable, go with a conservative solution that worked, and now they're very close to putting a bullet in their own heads because it's just not going to be competitive from a cost standpoint. Then again, there are some things about this launch system that give it some unique advantages. For example, the Guyana Space Center is located at 5 degrees north latitude, closer to the equator than any major launch facility on the planet, which gives them an advantage as far as lofting heavy payloads either into low Earth orbit or all the way to geosynchronous transfer orbit or to the moon for that matter. But does that provide enough of an advantage? Not really. Not if they keep this thing fully expendable. But the good news is Arianespace has already recognized this and is intending to have further versions of the Ariane 6 that includes reusability, and they're working on a reusable second stage right now. Second stage project is called Phoebus, and the second stage itself is called Icarus, which stands for Innovative Carbon Ariane Upper Stage, made out of advanced carbon fibers, much lighter than the current upper stage of the Ariane 5, and also it's going to have a relightable engine called Prometheus. Now currently the Prometheus engine is only designed to be used with methalox, however they are redesigning it to also use hydrogen and oxygen. Now, if this sounds a little bit familiar, well, it should be, because it bears a great deal of similarity to the upper stage of the Vulcan Centaur, a reusable engine that can utilize hydrogen and oxygen, and therefore can be refueled by a fuel depot that gets its supplies from the moon. So you could use this thing as a space tug, just like the Centaur 5. So by taking advantage of the lightweight characteristics of the upper stage and the increased performance capabilities of the Prometheus, this new upper stage can deliver heavier payloads to higher orbits. We're talking 23.6 tons to low Earth orbit, 13.5 tons to geosynchronous transfer orbit, or 10.5 tons all the way to the moon. This is, of course, assuming that you use 4 solid rocket boosters to increase this thing's thrust. Now, granted, this is nothing compared to Starship, but extremely competitive compared to just about anything else out there. But, again, fully expendable, so how do you make it affordable? Well, the reusable upper stage would make a difference, but all of everything else that you're throwing away can only be made up for by government subsidies, which is the only way that Europe is able to offer the Ariane 6 for as little as 85 million euros, which is very competitive with the SpaceX Falcon Heavy. But once again, the European taxpayers are footing some of that bill, something that gets me very angry. Is there a solution to this? Well, interestingly, there is, and Europe's working on that too. One advantage that Ariane 6 intends to use to its greatest extent is the fairing size. This is a very large fairing, 5.4 meters in diameter and 20 meters in length, assuming that you go for the king-sized version. This is a fairing that can include several different types of payloads. Not only that, it also has a compartmentalized system to carry a bunch of secondary payloads, small sats, that sort of thing, up to 200 kilograms apiece. So as a result, if you have a relightable engine that can be used over and over again and multiple payloads in the same fairing, you can deliver satellites to LEO, SSO, geosynchronous transfer orbit, all kinds of different configurations using the same rocket. Therefore, the more customers you have, the lower the price is for every customer. This makes the rocket more competitive in the way that Vulcan Centaur is going to be competitive. But there are things on the horizon that are going to make Arianespace even more competitive, and this is an Aerospike engine being tested by Pangea. This will improve thrust by a further 15%, assuming that the technology works out all right, and therefore improve lift capacity for the Ariane 6 even further. Now, this prototype makes a very cool sound, admittedly, but Aerospike engines are highly controversial. They've been studied for decades because of their greater efficiency. They don't have the bell-shaped nozzle of a conventional engine, optimizing the expansion of the exhaust, and you can get, as Pangea claims, 15% more thrust for the same amount of propellant. Now, Pangea claims that they've cracked the Aerospike engine problem by using a type of copper alloy called GRC-OP42, that's a mouthful, along with 3D printing the engine, making it easier to produce the complex series of channels for circulating propellants in the engine before reaching the combustion chamber. It's a highly complicated engine, but if they have indeed mastered it, that means they can have the most efficient and productive engine on the planet, better even than the Raptor. And if they can scale this up for use on the Ariane 6, then that can make for a very competitive solution. And then there's the Ariane Next program, which intends to use the same kind of reusable first stage that SpaceX uses, and in some cases multiple stages similar to the Falcon Heavy, capable of carrying heavier payloads than the FH to higher orbits, and also of course a larger fairing. But this is a long ways on the horizon, and I was talking about getting astronauts to space in 4 years. How the hell do we do that with the Ariane 6? Because that's about the only thing that the ESA has at its disposal. It has no other heavy lift rockets, at least that are that close to completion, aside from the Ariane 6. How are they going to use this with an undeveloped crew capsule to get to orbit, or get astronauts to orbit rather, in just 4 years? Well, 2 words: Sierra Space. And yes, I know you guys have seen this video many times over, but what many of you may not have noticed is that in addition to ULA launchers, this vehicle is designed to be launched on an Ariane 5, let alone an Ariane 6. If we had a crew-rated Dream Chaser right now, we could put it on top of an Ariane 5, and the ESA could be launching astronauts to orbit by 2022. What we lack, of course, is a crew-rated Dream Chaser. But guess what? That's what Sierra Space is working on right now without NASA's help. As a matter of fact, they just received another $1.2 billion worth of funding, about half of which they're applying towards the Dream Chaser to make it human-rated. And what I'm advocating is that the ESA succeed where NASA failed. Instead of continuing on with the Starliner as NASA continues to stubbornly do, the ESA should jump on this opportunity, put out their own commercial crew contract, and hire Sierra Space, who is scheduled to have a human-rated Dream Chaser by 2026. By all means, accept other proposals as well, but I don't see anybody delivering a human-rated capsule as fast as Sierra Space will be able to do. And not only that, Europe already has an infrastructural build-out in the works to make Dream Chaser functional in Europe. As many of you have probably heard, Sierra Space and Spaceport Cornwall have already inked an agreement to make Spaceport Cornwall a landing facility for the Dream Chaser. And in my opinion, this is just the beginning of a long history of positive economic development as far as the private space industry is concerned between Sierra Space and the European continent. You could have a Dream Chaser launch on top of an Ariane rocket from the Guyana spaceport and have it land with its astronauts safe and sound in Cornwall. And there would be all kinds of advantages attached to this. First of all, you would not need oceanic recovery like you need everything associated with NASA at the moment. As all of you know, the Dream Chaser can land just like the space shuttle does. The passengers and experiments on board would experience only 1.5 G's worth of re-entry, which is far, far less than anything else that is currently in use, which would give the ESA a unique advantage for crewed space missions. Now, once again, is Sierra Space an American company? Yes. However, have they signed an exclusive contract with NASA for a crewed spacecraft? No, they have not. As a matter of fact, they seem to be going in an entirely different direction with the Orbital Reef project in a completely privatized space station with a privatized human-rated spacecraft. So why could the ESA not make use of it? And besides, how exactly do you define an American corporation these days anyway? After all, Rocket Lab is an American corporation, Virgin Orbit is an American corporation, officially anyway, and one of the co-founders of Sierra Space, Fatih Osman, is Turkish, which is of course a European country. So why really do we have to set up these kinds of national boundaries when we're talking about the future of spaceflight anyway? I think since the ESA has not completed a great deal of work as far as a human-rated spacecraft is concerned anyway, and they want to, why not take advantage of a spacecraft that NASA discarded? And also, why not take advantage of a space station that Europeans are already building? That's right, even though Axiom Space is an American company, Thales Alenia, a European company, is building the modules for it. So why not set up an agreement with Axiom Space to add a few extra modules perhaps, committed to the ESA onto the Axiom space station, or perhaps an entirely new space station sprung off of the Axiom station that could be disconnected later on and become its own free-flying space station. So many possibilities through so many European companies that a lot of people don't even realize are European. Indeed, Axiom is already reaching out to other potential customers such as the nation of Monaco, who is interested in sending astronauts into LEO, along with Australia. Why not the European Space Agency as well? Especially considering that NASA awarded Axiom a $140 million bonus for winning a contest for a private space station attached to the ISS, and then Congress went and approved about 15% of that sum. Not a very good follow-through in my opinion. Axiom should be reaching out, and they currently are anyway, to other potential customers who would help them realize their dream. The ESA would be perfect partners, especially since Europeans are building their space station for them anyway. The fact that Europe is so woefully behind in manned spaceflight, and the fact that a European child cannot realistically look forward to being an astronaut given the odds that they have to fight, these sorts of things make me beyond frustrated and beyond angry. And it can change. It can change soon. Germany is the world's fourth largest economy. The UK is the world's fifth largest economy. Both of them are substantially larger than Russia's economy. They have a manned space program. Why can't Europe? If Europe had a human-rated Dream Chaser, and they already have the Ariane 5, they could start launching astronauts next year, as I already said. Why not start to pursue this? But it's going to take investment, it's going to take will, and it's going to take cooperation. Something that's been difficult to find in recent years. But given the consequences of falling hopelessly behind the Chinese and everybody else, I think with the cards on the table as they are right now, Europe has no choice but to take a huge leap forward. If you like what I have to say, if you like content like this and want to see it continue, it's all in the description, and I could certainly use your support, or just a like and subscribe, and I will be very happy. So until Europe realizes that they too need a manned space program so that their astronauts can aspire to the types of things that the Americans and Russians have grown accustomed to over the last 6 decades, I urge all of you to stay angry about space.